So the Aztecs is another historical, but is the first to really delve into the potential ramifications of time travel. Centering around Barbara, this serial has become one of my favourite historicals just for its depiction of time travel within the series, presenting it quite differently to how it is later on, and perhaps beginning an arc for the Doctor which runs through several later historicals, whether by design or by accident. Thankfully, unlike the previous serial, the Aztec stays in the same location with the same characters and so is far easier to dissect. And as it's written by returning Marco Polo writer John Lucarotti, that means it's rich with character. Our quartet find themselves in the burial chamber of a temple which is designed to only allow for people to exit, so that reincarnated spirits can leave the chamber. A very strong start for trapping the characters in the setting, forcing their hand like with Marco Polo, and forcing them to be a part of the world around them until they figure out an escape. Fortunately, their situation is improved due to Barbara being believed to be the reincarnation of the Aztecs' high priest Yetaxa, and therefore a god. This gives Barbara power over the Aztec people, but her presence creates a divide between the high priest of knowledge, Ortlock, and the high priest of sacrifice, Totoxal, with Ortlock strongly believing Barbara to be the reincarnation of Yetaxa and putting his faith in her as their leader, while Totoxal is in doubt of Barbara's story, believing her to be a false goddess, which he wishes to destroy. Using her power, Barbara is able to allow the Doctor and Ian to roam around the Aztec civilization while Susan remains with her as her handmaid. It is decided by Totoxal that Ian shall become the new leader of the Aztec army, which causes tension with the current leader, Ixtar. I'll explain more about this decision later when the plot reaches it, but simply it's the first step in one of Totoxal's plans to destroy Barbara. Meanwhile, the Doctor meets a woman named Kameka, a sage and philosopher, someone who the Doctor can talk to in a way he can't with any of his companions. The two are old and wise but youthful in heart and find comfort in each other's company. Through Kameka, the Doctor learns of the designer of the temple, T'Pau, and is able to get a meeting arranged with his son, who turns out to be Ixtar. And now we're seeing these two separate plot threads being weaved together into one, as Ixtar is only willing to give the Doctor the plans to the temple if he assists him in winning a battle, which unbeknownst to the Doctor is against Ian, and so the Doctor gives Ixtar a poisonous needle from a plant, which will sap his opponent's strength. Although Ixtar goes back on his word and doesn't give the Doctor the plans in the end, forcing the Doctor to find the secret entrance himself. As mentioned, Ian is to fight Ixtar. This is arranged by Totoxal as a plan to prove Barbara is a false goddess. The Doctor tries to warn Ian of the poison, but is unable to until the fight is already underway, and in fact causes an opening for Ixtar to use the poison. With Ian's strength being sapped, the fight begins to take a turn to Ixtar's advantage, and yes, I did say turn to Ixtar's advantage, as despite the obvious skill gap, Ian basically dominates the fight, and even after being poisoned, Ian is still holding his own before finally being beaten. I think we might finally have some answers about how Ian was able to intimidate Vaser. So Barbara arrives and orders the fight to stop, but Totoxal prevents this, forcing Barbara to have to stop the fight herself, which she does by taking Totoxal's knife and putting it to his throat. I think Barbara might be a bit more bloodthirsty than I first realised. But this is great, showing off Barbara's intelligence and quick thinking. She has no powers and so uses earthly means to put an end to the fight. Getting out of Totoxal's trap in the way, he has no true way to argue with. And it's a scene which helps reinforce Barbara's mission. I haven't mentioned it yet, but with Barbara in a position of power over the Aztecs, she's decided to use that power to change history and prevent the destruction of the Aztecs.
If I could start the destruction of everything that's evil here, then everything that is good would survive when Cortes lands.
But you can't rewrite history. Not one line.
Now the serial doesn't delve too much into the good of the Aztecs, bar giving the world cocoa beans and therefore chocolate, while the bad side is on full display. By bad I mean their savage nature of sacrificing people alongside their brutal punishments, one of which Susan nearly experiences, that being... While it does weaken the serial, Barbara's mission is still valid. The Aztecs are people who will be wiped out because of their primitive beliefs, and now she has the chance to prevent that bloodshed and save the lives of countless people. And the Doctor understands her view, but he pleads with Barbara to stop. At this point we don't know much about the Doctor's previous experience with time travel and the possible ramifications, but how he talks about it is somewhat different to what you'd expect. Now I'll end up discussing this more in later historicals, notably there's a few moments in the Reign of Terror which expand on this, but the Doctor doesn't speak of the danger of changing time, but the impossibility of it.
Barbara, one last appeal. What you are trying to do is utterly impossible. I know. Believe me, I know.
Time travel is usually, if not almost always, presented as you shouldn't change history because of the possible ramifications. Even later in the series, that is the rule. But the Aztecs takes a different approach, that the past is what it is and cannot be changed. The Doctor's greater concern here is for Barbara, not for the history of Earth. And Barbara's response to this?
Not Barbara. Yetaxa.
And the Doctor is proven right. This discussion happens right before a sacrifice which Barbara intends to prevent, and show that the rain they are sacrificing to bring will come anyway. Barbara stops the sacrifice, but...
You have denied me honor.
Honor us then with your death.
And with his death comes the rain. Even though the sacrifice was stopped, the first sacrifice jumping to his death, he still died as a sacrifice, although not as originally intended. Barbara tried to change history, and it corrected itself. Also during the sacrifice, the Doctor tries to shield Susan from what's happening, but she intervenes in an attempt to stop it. Due to this, Susan breaks the law, and so Totoxel wants her punished. Barbara tries to defend Susan with the defence of lack of knowledge, so Totoxel responds with,
Then let knowledge be beaten into her.
Fortunately, Barbara is able to have Susan instead taught the customs of the Aztecs, allowing Carol Ann Ford to have a 2-week holiday. Yes, like Hartnell in the previous serial, Carol Ann Ford has her holiday from production, meaning she only appears in pre-filmed inserts for episodes 2 and 3. Since we're on Susan, I suppose I might as well discuss her impact on the story, which is basically non-existent. During the pre-filmed insert, Susan's being taught about Aztecs customs by Ortlock, and is set up for an arranged marriage with the perfect victim, which she refuses. There's not really a whole lot here. It's the most educational section of the entire serial, as information could just be dumped on the viewers, and even her arranged marriage doesn't go anywhere. It's basically just another reason for the main characters to leave in a hurry, although by that point Susan's already been prepared for another punishment due to her refusal to marry. I guess it helps to characterise the perfect victim a bit before his sacrifice at the end, which does somewhat increase the horror as we know of his character, but he's still a tertiary character in the story. Getting back to the main plot, we've got a few things going on. Starting with the Doctor, he is getting closer to Kameka, to the point of becoming engaged to her.
Oh, sweet favoured man, you have declared your love for me, and I acknowledge and accept your gentle proposal.
And this shows a different side to the Doctor. At first he's completely shocked, but once it's sunk in, he's very casual about it, and in fact very content with it.
Where did you get hold of this?
My fiancée.
I see. You're what?
Yes, I made some cocoa and got engaged.
Oh, by the way, Doctor, congratulations.
Despite still being determined to get back to the TARDIS, it's been pushed back in his mind a bit. He's found something else for his attention. And this connection leads to the Doctor being given a brooch by Kameka, which once belonged to Ixtar's father and was found in the Garden of Peace when he went missing. This brooch being the clue the Doctor needs to discovering the secret entrance into the tomb. Ian meanwhile continues his rivalry with Ixtar, which leads to Ixtar following Ian to the Garden of Peace, where Ian is meeting with the Doctor to use the secret entrance into the tomb. In an attempt to kill Ian, Ixtar seals up the entrance again, mentioning to the Doctor that the water would flood the garden if not. Again we're seeing Ixtar's less than honourable nature. Although he's more confident he could defeat Ian after their last fight, Ixtar still tries to kill him rather than have to face him again. Fortunately, the Doctor was right and Ian is able to enter the tomb, escaping the rising water, and is able to put a length of cloth under the door so that they can reopen it. And this is where everyone's stories start to come together for the end. The Doctor spends his time with Kameka while building a pulley in order to reopen the tomb. Ian goes to rescue Susan, and Barbara finally realises she can't change time and just has to survive to Toxel, who's gaining the trust of others against her. Ian is framed for the attempted murder of Ortlock, which is seemingly the final nail in the coffin for Ortlock as he declares Yutaxa a false goddess. And I think this is the perfect time to discuss Ortlock's arc throughout the serial, as I haven't really mentioned him. While Totoxel was almost immediately against Barbara, Ortlock stayed loyal, and despite everything, he remained loyal. Barbara tried to stop sacrifices, bent the laws for her friends, and even asked Ortlock to join her against Totoxel, but despite this remained loyal to his faith in Barbara. This being cleverly ironic as he's the High Priest of Knowledge, and yet he doesn't realise the truth. In some ways being blinded by his own faith in the way you'd think Totoxel would be. Totoxel is the villain, but he's in the right, while Ortlock is in the wrong, and working with the heroes who are lying to everyone. All these events lead to his crisis of sorts, deciding to leave the Aztec civilization and going into the wilderness to consider his faith, making one final decision which leads to Susan's freedom. Kameka helps to free Ian and Susan, who reunite with the Doctor and Barbara as they prepare to escape. The Doctor and Kameka have a final moment in which they say goodbye.
You can't stay here.
I'd hoped I might stay by your side. And think of me. Think of me.
But before they can escape, Ixtar arrives and challenges Ian one final time, which leads to a fight in which Ixtar is thrown from the top of the temple to his death. The quartet escape and Totoxel begins the perfect sacrifice in order to end the solar eclipse. The serial ends with a final conversation between the Doctor and Barbara, and it's one of the best moments. Barbara is saddened that she couldn't save the Aztecs, but the Doctor comforts her in the knowledge that she was able to still save one life, that of Ortlock, by showing him the truth. It's a very touching moment, It shows the Doctor in a way that hasn't been touched on yet. His kindness and comfort. It's very similar to his scene with Barbara at the end of Edge of Destruction. These two just connect in a way which the rest of the character dynamics don't. There's something about them which clicks. And for emotional Doctor moments, we've still got one left. He places Kameka's seal down on the tomb, prepared to leave it behind, but changes his mind and recollects it before entering the TARDIS. He's broken his own heart, but can't leave Kameka completely. And then we have one final scene of the Doctor confidently piloting the TARDIS away from the Aztec civilization. The Aztecs is one of those serials which is just too good for words. The plots just fit together perfectly and just bounce off of each other. Almost the entire runtime is used to push the quartet through their arcs, that being emotional or physical. Like with Marco Polo, there's plenty of historical knowledge built into the structure of the serial, gently massaged in so it can inform without boring. Perhaps the perfect template for historical, although it would be great if Susan got to do something, at least she didn't scream quite as much as usual. But something is wrong with the TARDIS. The ship has landed but is seemingly still on the move. What could be causing this? Next time, the Censorites.